So Jort Kelder, one of the Netherlands' most well-known commentators, he's got a diagnosis. He argues that the country is fundamentally stuck. It's bogged down in bureaucracy, it's trapped in a flawed European project, and it's basically at war with its own wealth creators. In this explainer, we're going to break down his pretty provocative analysis of a nation that he sees at a major crossroads.
All right, so here's the game plan for breaking down his thinking. We're going to start with his diagnosis of this stuck Netherlands, then we'll zoom out to the wider European dilemma. After that, we'll look at the battle over wealth, a potential new social contract, and finally, what lessons could be learned from other countries.
Okay, first up, Kelder's core critique. And what's really interesting is that it all starts with a very simple, everyday frustration, one that he uses as a powerful metaphor for the entire country.
So, get this. He points to his own street in Amsterdam. It's just 200 meters long, and it hadn't been touched since the 1940s. And to get it fixed, it took 8 agonizingly slow months. Now for him, this wasn't just some annoying construction project. It was the perfect symbol of a country that's completely bogged down by inefficiency and has zero sense of urgency.
And this little story, well, it leads to his much bigger point. He argues that after decades of the state acting like a parent, it's created a culture where citizens have become totally risk-averse and dependent. The whole mindset has become about avoiding mistakes at all costs, not about actually striving for excellence.
And he really hammers this point home with a sharp contrast. In the Netherlands, he says, a civil servant gets rewarded for not making mistakes. But you go to Singapore, and they get bonuses based on a single metric, creating prosperity. It's this fundamental difference in what you reward, he argues, that explains why one system just stagnates while the other literally leaped from the third world to the first in just a couple of generations.
Now, this inefficiency at home, it doesn't just happen in a bubble. Kelder argues it's all part of a much broader European Union that, in his view, has a massive design flaw right at its very core.
He basically says that Europe created this political union with a single currency, the euro, but it never actually created a true economic union. And the result? He calls it a constant, unspoken wealth transfer of about 2 to 3% every single year, from the financially responsible north to the south. It's a system that just papers over these really deep cultural and financial cracks.
And this slide just perfectly lays out the two camps he sees. On one side, you've got the Protestant North. These are countries with a high tax morale, fiscal discipline, you know the drill. And on the other side, the Latin South, which for him also includes France. And that's characterized by low tax compliance and what he calls a financial drama. One side pays, the other benefits, and that tension is just baked right into the euro. So the bottom line here is his incredibly uncompromising stance on this. He's actually become more pro-European when it comes to things like defense and technology, because he sees the need for scale. But when it comes to the money, he draws a hard line in the sand. He just flat out refuses to accept the idea of sharing national debts, especially when, as he loves to point out, the average Italian actually has more private savings than the average Dutch person.
Now, this financial tension isn't just a European issue. It's like a mirror image of a fierce debate that's happening right inside the Netherlands itself, an increasingly heated battle over the country's own wealthy elites and what their role in society should be.
And Kelder makes this really fascinating distinction. For generations, he says, old money in the Netherlands was basically invisible. It was all about quietly passing wealth on to the next generation. But then, starting in the 90s, you get the rise of this very visible new money. We're talking Ferraris, super yachts, the whole deal. And it completely changed how the public sees wealth, making it a prime target for political anger. And the result of all this new visibility and the political backlash is what Kelder describes as a punishing tax environment. When you add it all up, the effective wealth tax rate is around 2.8%, a number that's so high compared to other European countries that it's starting to have some pretty serious consequences.
And the consequences are pretty stark, and in his view, completely backward. Entrepreneurs feel like they're being treated as villains, so capital is just fleeing the country. He estimates that a third of the Dutch rich list now lives somewhere else. And maybe even worse, corporate giants like Shell and Unilever have packed up and left. Kelder calls this the single biggest failure of recent Dutch governments.
So, if punishing the wealthy and driving them away doesn't work, what's the alternative? Well, Kelder argues for a much more pragmatic approach. And he points to another Northern European country that found a really clever way out of this exact problem.
This right here is the key question he believes policymakers need to be asking. It means moving beyond just ideology, beyond simply yelling, tax the rich, and asking,
What actually works? What keeps capital and talent inside your borders, working for the good of the country?
He proposes a new social contract that's inspired by Sweden. Over there, a social democratic government had this light bulb moment. They realized their wealth taxes were doing more harm than good, so they scrapped them. But here's the clever part. In return, they created powerful tax incentives for the rich to invest their money in Swedish startups. And the result? Sweden now has one of the most vibrant, exciting tech scenes in the entire world.
So when you pull all these threads together, what does it all add up to? Well, Kelder points to a few key blueprints from other nations that he believes offer a really clear path forward for the Netherlands.
It's really this powerful trio of lessons. He argues the Netherlands needs to take Singapore's relentless focus on efficiency, combine it with Sweden's pragmatic deal-making with its elite, and top it all off with Switzerland's conscious choice to just be the best. Because in today's world, a relentless pursuit of quality is the only real way to win.
But in the end, after all this analysis, Kelder argues that the problem might not just be the politicians or the system. In his view, the Dutch people themselves have become complacent, demanding everything from the state without being willing to accept any of the trade-offs.
And that's where he leaves us, with this final, really provocative thought. After diagnosing all the country's problems, from its slow streets to its tricky European relationships, he turns the question right back on the citizen. Is the real problem a broken system that needs to be fixed, or is it a spoiled population that has simply forgotten what it takes to be prosperous?